All right, so get this.
Okay.
We're diving deep into user stories applied by Mike Cohn today.
Interesting.
And you know how we talk about software requirements like all the time?
Yeah.
It can be like a make or break thing for a project, right?
Oh, absolutely.
This book is basically saying ditch those massive documents
Yeah.
and try something way more conversational.
Mhm.
And it might even help you outside of software development too.
Oh, wow.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, that's interesting. What I found really interesting about this book is that Cohn, challenges this whole idea that we need to figure out, every single little detail up front. Traditional software requirements, documents,
Yeah.
they often end up being these huge, unwieldy beasts,
Yeah.
and they're outdated almost as soon as they're printed,
That's so true.
you know?
You spend all this time meticulously documenting every single thing.
Yeah.
And by the time the developers actually get to it,
Right.
it's already ancient history.
Exactly. Cohn argues that this Big Bang approach actually hinders communication rather than helping it.
So what's the alternative?
Well,
What does he propose?
He proposes user stories,
Okay.
and they're not just another type of requirement document.
Okay.
Think of them more like a starting point for a conversation.
A conversation? That doesn't sound very technical.
Well, that's the point.
Okay.
It's about moving away from rigid documentation
Right.
and moving towards a more collaborative approach.
Yeah.
Cohn actually calls user stories
Yeah.
a promise for a conversation.
Interesting.
It's about understanding the why
Okay.
behind the what.
Okay. I'm starting to see the appeal here.
Yeah.
Can you give me a real-world example?
Sure.
Because sometimes this stuff gets a little too abstract for me.
So imagine you're at the pool with your kid,
Okay.
and they dip their toe in the water
Yeah.
and say, make it warmer.
Okay.
Now, the water's already warm to you, right?
Right.
But to them, it's not. You're both using the same word,
Yeah.
but you have different understandings of what warmer actually means. And this happens in software development all the time.
Totally.
We think we're being clear.
Right.
But without that back and forth conversation, misunderstandings are inevitable.
That is such a good example.
Yeah.
I can definitely see how that applies to so many things.
Right.
Not just swimming pools.
Exactly. User stories are all about bridging that communication gap
Okay.
by encouraging that ongoing dialogue throughout the whole development process.
So I'm getting the why of user stories now.
Okay.
What do they actually look like, though?
So Cohn breaks them down into 3 parts.
Okay.
You have the card,
Okay.
the conversation,
Okay.
and the confirmation.
All right. Break that down for me.
So the card is basically
Yeah.
a concise description of the user's need.
Got it.
It could be an actual physical card
Right.
or just a note in a digital tool.
Okay.
Think of it as a reminder. But the real magic happens in the conversation.
Right.
This is where developers and users actually get together,
Right.
hash out the details, and make sure everybody's on the same page.
Okay.
It's all about asking questions,
Right.
clarifying assumptions,
Yeah.
and really digging into the user's needs.
So you're taking that initial idea from the card,
Yeah.
really fleshing it out.
Exactly.
But how do you make sure that everyone walks away
Right.
with the same understanding?
Well, that's where the confirmation comes in.
Okay.
It's all about defining acceptance tests.
Okay.
These tests determine whether the story has been successfully implemented
Yeah.
and whether it actually meets the user's expectations.
So it's kind of like a checklist
Yeah.
to make sure you've actually built what the user wanted.
Exactly.
Right.
When you combine the card, the conversation, and the confirmation,
Yeah.
you get this really powerful trifecta that helps reduce miscommunication
Right.
and ensures everyone is on the same page.
Okay. I'm starting to get the hang of this. So why are so many people raving about user stories?
Yeah.
Aside from the whole fewer misunderstandings thing, which is obviously a huge plus.
One of the major benefits is prioritization.
Okay.
Because user stories are relatively small
Yeah.
and self-contained, it's much easier to prioritize them based on user value.
So it's like sorting your to-do list, but for software features.
Exactly.
You tackle the most important things first.
Right.
The stuff that's really going to make a difference for the user.
It helps teams focus on delivering maximum impact.
I like it.
And another key benefit is flexibility.
Okay.
Unlike those rigid requirement documents we talked about,
Yeah.
user stories can actually evolve as the project progresses.
That makes sense because in the software world,
Right.
things change so quickly.
Exactly.
You need a system that can keep up.
Yeah, they're adaptable.
So you're telling me user stories are like the chameleons
You could say that.
of software development,
Yeah,
always adapting to their environment.
that's a great way to put it.
And of course, there's the improved communication aspect, which we've already talked about.
Right.
User stories just naturally encourage more interaction between developers and users,
Yeah.
which leads to a shared understanding of what's being built.
Right.
Why?
Exactly.
Okay, so we're breaking down silos, getting everyone talking, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about this tacit knowledge thing that Cohn talks about.
Oh, yeah.
What's that all about?
So tacit knowledge is that kind of unspoken shared understanding
Okay.
that develops within a team when they're working really closely together. It comes from asking questions,
Right.
iterating,
Yeah.
and learning from each other's experiences.
Okay.
It's like a secret weapon that helps teams come up with better solutions faster.
So the more you work together using user stories,
Yes.
the more this tacit knowledge builds up and the better your solutions become.
Exactly.
It's like leveling up as a team.
Right.
I like that.
It's a good way to think about it.
All right, let's get down to brass tacks.
Okay.
How do you actually write a good user story? What are the secrets?
Well, first and foremost,
Yeah.
they need to be valuable and testable.
Hold on, back up a sec.
Okay.
Valuable to whom?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Each user story should represent something meaningful to either the user
Okay.
or the person buying the software.
Okay.
And the testable part is crucial.
Right.
Because if you can't test it,
Yeah.
how do you know if you've actually built what you set out to build?
It's like setting a goal,
Yeah,
but without a way to measure it, you're just wandering around aimlessly.
exactly.
Okay.
And speaking of goals, you want to make sure your stories are the right size.
What's the right size for a user story?
Well,
Do they come in small, medium, and large?
think of it this way.
Okay.
Each user story should be small enough
Yeah.
to be completed within a single iteration or work cycle. This helps prevent them from becoming overwhelming
Okay.
and ensures a steady flow of value delivery.
So break down those mammoth tasks
Right.
into bite-sized pieces.
Exactly.
Got it. Any other pro tips for crafting awesome user stories?
Here's one that might surprise you.
Okay.
Avoid getting bogged down in UI details, at least initially,
Really? Why is that?
because it's about keeping the focus on the user's goal,
Okay.
not getting lost in the weeds of like specific buttons or
Right.
drop-down menus.
Gotcha.
Trust me, those details will come later.
Yeah.
Initially, it's all about understanding the user's needs and motivations.
Right.
You can always use sketches
Yeah.
or prototypes to clarify the UI aspects later on,
Okay.
once you have a better understanding of the big picture.
So it's like planning a road trip.
Uh-huh.
You need to know where you're going before you start worrying about which gas stations you'll stop at along the way.
That's a great analogy.
And speaking of examples,
Yeah.
there's a great one in the book
Okay.
about a job posting website.
Right.
They have this user story that says, a company can pay for a job posting with a credit card. Sounds simple enough, right?
Yeah, what's the catch?
Well, initially, it's just a basic statement of the user's goal.
Right.
But as the team starts digging deeper
Uh-huh.
through those conversations we talked about,
Right.
it evolves into a much more detailed set of requirements.
Okay.
Like, what types of credit cards are accepted?
Uh-huh.
How do you validate the payment?
Right.
What happens if a card gets declined?
Yeah, all those details.
So it's like that make it warmer scenario.
Okay.
You start with a simple statement,
Right?
but through conversation and clarification,
Okay.
it becomes much more robust.
Exactly. Those conversations help uncover all those hidden complexities
Right.
and ensure that you're building something that truly meets the user's needs.
This is all starting to make so much sense now.
Good.
But let's face it, no system is perfect.
Right.
What are some of the potential pitfalls
Okay.
we should be aware of when working with user stories?
Well, one common challenge is something called gold plating.
Gold plating. Sounds fancy.
It is, but not in a good way.
Okay.
Gold plating is when developers get a little bit carried away
Right.
and start adding all these extra features that weren't part of the original user story.
So it's like that go the extra mile mentality gone wrong.
Exactly.
Yep.
Sometimes developers strive for that, like, wow factor.
Yeah.
But if it's not aligned with the user's actual needs,
Yeah.
it can lead to scope creep and wasted effort.
So you end up building a gold-plated Lamborghini
Right.
when all the user really wanted was a reliable Toyota.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so avoid the urge to over-engineer things.
Yeah.
Got it. What else should we watch out for?
Another common pitfall is adding too much detail too early.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about keeping UI details out of the initial stories?
Right.
Well, the same principle applies to other aspects of the story as well.
Mm.
Over-specifying can make things too rigid
Okay.
and stifle creativity.
So it's like trying to cram all the nuances of a complex feature onto a tiny little note card.
Right.
It's just not going to work.
The note card analogy is a good one.
Yeah.
User stories should be concise and focused.
Right.
The details should come out in those all-important conversations.
So less is more when it comes to writing user stories.
Yes, keep it simple.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
What other challenges do teams typically face?
Prioritization can be a major hurdle.
Okay.
Sometimes teams really struggle to figure out which stories are the most important
Right.
and should be tackled first.
Why is that such a tricky thing to do?
Well, it could be because the stories themselves aren't clearly focused on user value, or maybe there's a lack of alignment between the development team and the customer.
Right.
Whatever the reason,
Yeah.
if you're finding it really difficult to prioritize stories, it could be a sign of deeper problems within the project.
So it's like a canary in a coal mine.
Yeah.
A warning that something might be off.
Exactly. Now, one technique that can help with prioritization is something called Moscow.
Moscow. What's that, some kind of top secret code?
Not quite.
Okay.
It stands for must have, should have, could have, won't have. It's a simple but effective framework for helping teams make those tough prioritization decisions.
So it's like a filter for your user stories.
Exactly.
Ensuring that you're always focusing on what's truly important.
Right?
So it's like a triage system for software features. I like it.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it.
It sounds like a great way to stay focused and avoid getting sidetracked.
Exactly. And the best part is you can use this technique outside of software development too.
Oh, really?
Think about your own work.
Okay.
What are your must-haves, your should-haves, and so on. Moscow can help you prioritize your own tasks and projects.
That's pretty powerful.
It is. It could be really helpful.
Whoa, mind blown. I can already see myself using this.
It's a good tool.
So user stories aren't just for techies, they're for everyone.
Exactly. They have broader applications.
This is great.
Yeah, it's a powerful concept.
Okay, so how do these user stories actually work in practice?
Well, we've talked about Scrum and XP.
All right.
Those are agile methodologies.
Right. Can you remind me what those are all about again?
So think of them as like frameworks or blueprints for building software in a way that's more flexible and responsive to change. They break the development process down into these short bursts called iterations,
Okay.
usually a couple of weeks long.
Okay.
And each iteration focuses on delivering like a small piece of working, tested software
Gotcha.
based on those prioritized user stories we talked about.
So instead of trying to build the entire Taj Mahal all at once,
Right.
you're building it one carefully crafted room at a time.
Exactly. And you're constantly checking to make sure everything fits together perfectly and getting feedback along the way.
Okay.
The beauty of this iterative approach
Yeah.
is that it allows for constant feedback and adaptation. The team gets regular input from users,
Okay.
testing their assumptions and adjusting course as needed.
So it's like having a GPS for software development.
Exactly.
If you take a wrong turn,
Right.
you can course correct right away instead of ending up mild off course.
In traditional methods, you might spend months, even years,
Oh, wow.
planning and building
Yeah.
before users even got a glimpse of the software.
Right.
By then, it could be too late to make significant changes.
It's like ordering a custom-made suit,
Uh-huh.
waiting months for it to arrive, and then realizing it's the wrong size and color.
Right. Not a good
Not a
feeling.
good feeling at all.
Agile flips that on its head.
Okay.
It's all about embracing change and delivering value quickly and iteratively.
Okay.
And user stories are a perfect fit for this approach
Right.
because they're small, flexible, and focused on user value.
So let's walk through a real-world scenario.
But-
Let's say we're using Scrum.
Okay.
What's the first step?
The first step is creating something called a product backlog.
Okay.
It's basically a prioritized wish list
Got it.
of all the features and user stories for the product.
Oh,
It's not set in stone, though.
Right.
It's a living document
Yeah.
that evolves throughout the project.
So it's like a giant to-do list for the software,
Yeah,
but one that you can constantly add to
right.
and rearrange as needed.
Exactly. And someone needs to be in charge of this list,
Right.
making sure it reflects the user's needs
Yeah.
and that the most valuable items are at the top.
That sounds like a pretty important role.
It is.
Who gets to be the keeper of the backlog?
That would be the product owner.
Okay.
They're the voice of the customer,
Got it.
understanding their needs
Right.
and making sure the team is building the right thing.
So the product owner is like the conductor of the orchestra,
I like that analogy.
making sure everyone is playing in harmony
Yeah.
and creating a beautiful symphony of software.
Now, at the beginning of each iteration, which in Scrum is called a sprint.
Okay.
The team has a sprint planning meeting.
What happens in this meeting? Do they break out the party hats and confetti?
Not quite.
Okay.
This is where the team sits down with the product owner
Right.
and decides which user stories from that product backlog they'll tackle in the upcoming sprint.
Okay.
They break down those stories into smaller tasks, estimate the effort involved, and basically make sure everyone knows what they need to do.
So it's like a mini planning session focusing on a manageable chunk of work.
And then throughout the sprint, the team has these quick daily Scrum meetings.
Okay.
Sometimes called stand-up meetings.
Stand-up meetings. Why are they called that?
Because they're supposed to be short and sweet.
Gotcha. So what's the point of these daily huddles?
It's a chance for everyone to sync up, share their progress, and flag any roadblocks they've encountered. It's all about transparency and keeping everyone in the loop.
I can see how that would help prevent those.
Yeah. Oh, no, I've been working on the wrong thing for a week situation.
Exactly. Those are not fun.
Not fun at all.
And at the end of the sprint, there's a sprint review meeting.
Ooh, is this where the team gets to show off their masterpiece?
Exactly. The team demonstrates the working software they've developed.
Okay.
Gathering feedback from the product owner and other stakeholders.
Cool.
It's a chance to celebrate achievements.
Right.
Learn from any mistakes.
Yeah.
And get everyone excited about the progress being made.
Sounds like a great way to keep that momentum going.
It is.
It seems like there's a lot of emphasis on communication and collaboration throughout this whole process.
Absolutely. That's one of the key principles of Agile methodologies. Breaking down those silos and fostering open dialogue is crucial for success.
Okay, now remind me again.
Okay.
How is XP different from Scrum?
So XP, or extreme programming, shares a lot of similarities with Scrum.
Okay.
It's also iterative and incremental.
Relying on user stories to guide development.
Okay.
But XP takes some of those core Agile principles to the extreme.
I like where this is going. Give me an example.
One of the key practices in XP is pair programming, where two developers work together side by side on the same code.
Oh, wow.
It might sound strange.
Yeah.
But it actually leads to higher quality code and fewer bugs.
So it's like having a built-in code buddy to bounce ideas off of and catch those silly mistakes before they turn into major headaches.
Exactly. And XP is also big on test-driven development, which means writing tests before you write the actual code.
Wait, so you're writing the tests before the code even exists?
That's right.
What's the point of that?
It seems counterintuitive, but it's incredibly effective. Writing the tests first forces you to really think through the requirements and the design of the code, ensuring you build the right thing from the get-go.
So it's like creating a blueprint for your code.
Exactly.
Making sure all the pieces fit together perfectly before you start building.
And XP is all about continuous integration, which means integrating code changes frequently, often multiple times a day.
Wow.
This helps avoid those dreaded integration hell scenarios.
Integration hell, yeah, I've heard of that.
Where you spend days trying to merge different code branches and everything breaks.
That does not sound fun.
It's not.
So it's like keeping your house tidy as you go.
Right.
Rather than waiting till the end of the month and having to deal with a mountain of clutter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Much easier to manage.
So while the book focuses mainly on user stories, it also touches on some other Agile practices and principles.
It does. Well, it highlights the importance of simplicity in design, the value of refactoring, and the need for a sustainable pace.
Sustainable pace, what's that all about?
It's about avoiding burnout and making sure the team can keep up the pace without sacrificing quality. It emphasizes working at a sustainable speed.
Gotcha.
Avoiding those dreaded death marches that were all too common in traditional software development.
So it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Exactly.
That's a refreshing perspective.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance.
It's not just about speed.
Right.
It's about building software in a way that's healthy and sustainable for everyone involved.
For the long haul.
Now let's get back to user stories for a sec.
Great.
We've talked about gold plating.
Yeah.
Too many details. Any other pitfalls we should be aware of?
Sometimes teams end up with stories that are either too small or too interconnected.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, if a story is too tiny, it might not represent any real value to the user.
Gotcha.
And if a story relies on a bunch of other stories being completed first,
right,
it can really disrupt the flow of development.
So it's like trying to put together a puzzle where some of the pieces are too small to be useful, and others are glued together in the wrong order.
Exactly. Frustrating.
And as we talked about earlier, prioritization can be a big challenge.
Yes.
If the stories aren't clearly focused on user value,
Right.
or if the development team and the customer aren't on the same page, prioritization becomes a nightmare.
It does. And remember Moscow, that's a great tool for sorting out those priorities.
Yeah, it's like having a triage system for your user stories.
Making sure you're focusing on the most critical ones first.
Now, remember something about user proxies in the book.
Oh, yes.
What are those all about?
So user proxies are essentially stand-ins for actual users.
Okay.
Often used when it's difficult to get direct access to your target audience. They might be subject matter experts, product managers, or even sales representatives who have a deep understanding of the customer.
So they're like the understudies of the user world.
Exactly.
Stepping in when the main actor isn't available.
But be careful. The book warns against relying too heavily on user proxies.
Why is that?
Because their perspectives might not always perfectly align with those of real users. They might have preconceived notions or biases that color their opinions.
That makes sense.
It's always best to involve actual users as much as possible.
Yeah, get the real deal.
Exactly. And the book offers some practical tips for working effectively with user proxies.
Okay, like what?
You can create user task forces.
Okay.
Involve multiple proxies to get diverse perspectives, conduct competitive analysis to understand how other products solve similar problems, and release early versions of the software to gather feedback from real users.
So it's about hedging your bets and making sure you're getting a well-rounded view of the user's needs.
Precisely. Now, there's a whole chapter in the book dedicated to acceptance testing, which is a crucial part of making sure those user stories are implemented correctly.
Right. Remember the confirmation part of a user story?
Yes.
That's about making sure you've built the right thing, right?
Exactly. Acceptance tests are like a set of criteria that define when a user story can be considered done. They're written before the developer starts coding and act as a guide for both development and testing.
So it's like a checklist for developers and testers, making sure all the boxes are ticked before a story can be considered complete.
And here's the key. The book emphasizes that acceptance tests should be written by the customer.
Oh, interesting.
Not the developers.
Why is that so important?
Because it ensures that the tests reflect the customer's understanding and expectations of the feature, not the developer's interpretation.
Gotcha.
It prevents those assumptions and helps guarantee that the software truly meets the user's needs.
It's like having the client sign off on the blueprints before construction begins.
No surprises later on.
Okay.
And the book even recommends writing these acceptance tests on the back of the user story card, keeping everything together in one place.
Oh, that makes sense.
Or if you're using a digital tool, the acceptance tests are linked to the user story.
Nice and organized.
Exactly. So you've got the what on the front of the card and the how do we know it's done on the back.
I like that.
And there's some pretty cool tools out there that can help you automate these acceptance tests.
Really?
Tools like FIT and Fitness allow you to write tests in a way that both technical and non-technical people can understand. And because they're automated, they can be run frequently, providing super fast feedback and catching any issues early on.
It's like having a robot tester constantly checking your work.
Exactly.
Making sure everything is top-notch.
Now, there's this chapter in the book that really caught my eye. It's called A Catalog of Story Smells.
Story smells. Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. What are we talking about here?
Think of them as warning signs. Those little hints that something might be off with your user stories. They might indicate problems with the stories themselves or with how the team is using them.
So they're like those red flags you see in relationships, telling you to proceed with caution.
The book identifies some common story smells, like stories that are too small, too big, too interconnected, too detailed, or just not valuable to the user.
So it's like a diagnostic tool for your user stories, helping you identify and address potential problems before they blow up into major issues.
It encourages teams to be mindful of those warning signs and to constantly improve their approach to working with user stories.
Always be learning and evolving.
That's right.
Now, one thing that really struck me is that the book suggests these user story principles can be applied beyond the realm of software development.
That's what's so cool about these concepts.
Yeah.
They're really about effective communication,
right?
Collaboration, and focusing on value.
Right.
Those are principles that apply to pretty much any field.
Totally.
Where people are working together to create something.
Okay, so we're not just building software.
Right.
We're building relationships, teams, and maybe even a better way of working together.
Pretty powerful stuff.
This is great.
It is. It's a very versatile concept.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into user stories applied.
Yeah.
It feels like we've covered so much already about this whole user story thing.
Right, from like that concise description of a need to how you have those conversations and confirmations that make sure everyone's on the same page.
And we even talked about why they're so important.
Yeah.
Like how they help teams build the right thing.
Right, and build it right.
Yeah, exactly. And we explored all sorts of stuff from prioritizing tasks with Moscow to navigating potential pitfalls like gold plating and overspecifying.
Right. Got to watch out for those story smells.
Oh, yeah, those are important.
Those are like little red flags.
Yeah.
Telling you to proceed with caution.
But, you know, one thing that really stood out to me is that user stories aren't just for software developers.
They're not. They're really a blueprint for effective communication and collaboration in any field.
So whether you're designing a website or planning a marketing campaign or even just trying to get your family organized for a vacation.
Yeah, all sorts of things.
The principles of user stories can help.
It's all about understanding needs, fostering conversations, and working together to achieve a shared goal.
It's like this universal language of getting things done.
Yeah, it's more human-centered and adaptable.
Now, before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something you said earlier about Agile being more than just a way of working. It's a culture.
It is. It's about shifting away from those traditional hierarchical structures where decisions are made at the top and they just trickle down.
And Agile is more about empowering teams, giving them the autonomy to make decisions and solve problems together.
Exactly. It's about trust, respect, and open communication.
It's not just about churning out software faster. It's about creating a work environment where people feel valued, heard, and motivated to do their best work.
That's what it's all about. Creating a culture of continuous improvement.
I love that.
Where everyone is learning and growing together.
It's like that old saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime.
That's a great analogy. Agile is about teaching people to fish.
Right. Giving them the skills and the mindset to adapt and thrive in a constantly changing world.
And remember, Agile isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a set of principles and practices that you can adapt to fit your own unique needs and context.
So it's like a toolbox.
It is.
You pick and choose the tools that work best for you and your team.
Exactly. There's no right or wrong way to do Agile.
It's
about finding what works best for your situation.
The key is to be open to experimentation. To constantly learn and adapt.
Iterate.
And to remember that it's all about delivering value to your users.
Whether they're customers, colleagues, or even your own family members.
Exactly. This has been an awesome deep dive.
It has.
We went from the basics of user stories to the broader philosophy of Agile methodologies.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
We explored the mechanics, the benefits, the challenges, and the real-world applications.
And I hope our listeners have come away with not just a deeper understanding of user stories, but a new way of thinking about how they approach their own work and collaborations.
And we want to encourage you to explore further, to dive deeper into the world of Agile.
It's a fascinating world.
And see how these principles can transform the way you work.
Absolutely.
And interact with others.
Think about your own projects, big or small. Ask yourself, how can I bring in the spirit of user stories?
How can I make this process more collaborative and focused on delivering real value? And never be afraid to experiment, to iterate, and to constantly learn and adapt.
Keep learning.
The world of Agile is constantly evolving.
It is. It's always changing.
And the possibilities are truly endless.
That's the exciting part.
Until next time, keep those user stories flowing.